Welcome back to the NerdNest podcast. Today, it's just me, it's just Russ, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. Russ, I want to start off with what we've been playing today. What games have you been playing lately?
Well, as always, just a ton of like retro games, mostly like testing and stuff. But I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I've been hearing more about it. But I sat down and I was like, you know what? It's time for Elden Ring. And so I sat down and I started up a new game, like went through the tutorial again, and I didn't get very far, like maybe a half hour after that, But still, it was like I sat down with purpose this time. In previous times, I just kind of sat down like, oh, I need to get to a point so I can save it and then use this for testing. But this time I was like, all right, I've got all those years of that testing that I've done, so I know to stay away from the guy on the horse, like that guy will just mess you up in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
And then I know like there's some like vulture things you can attack and like, so I was like doing a couple of those things. But there's a couple of things I noticed. The first one was that like, I'm very scared to go any further than that. Like there's just, I don't know what it is, but I feel like the further I get away from home base, I'm going to get lost. And I realize there's a map and all that kind of stuff too. But part of it is so immersive that I'm like, okay, this is actually me, like in real life, me out there. And I don't want to go too far away because I'm not strong enough yet, And so I'm having this weird, like, just empathizing too much with this random character, But that's been kind of interesting.
Did you name him Russ?
I named him Onions Are Gross, so yeah, basically
okay.
Russ. So
Yeah, okay.
And then also, the second is that like, there's actually two more. So one of them is that I don't know why, but I feel again because of the whole difficulty thing and whatnot, and it's so immersing, like. Another part of it is that I feel like I'm playing a game that I normally would play on very easy, but I'm playing it on like medium or hard settings. And that just makes me want to just crawl inch by inch to make sure I don't like go any further. And I try to want to game the game kind of thing. It's really weird. Like I was thinking, like I played God of War, like the original, like not the original, but the PS4 one. And I got all the Valkyries in that game. I don't know if you ever did that, but like that was like big battles, But I was playing on like the easiest setting, and so I was able to get all the Valkyries, and I felt such elation with that. And I was like, I don't think I'm gonna be able to do that with this game. I think that I'm gonna hit a wall pretty quickly, and so that's kind of why I was going so slowly with it. The second thing, or third thing now, is that I need to get rid of that X button. The X button makes you like drink a potion or whatever, right?
Oh yeah.
But my brain is hardwired for attack. And so I will sneak up on a guy or I'll like run around him and I'll have the perfect positioning and I'll just drink my thing right in front of the guy. And I'm like, I didn't even need it, And so that's just something I got to work on because I'm not used to pressing L or R1 and R2 to actually attack. And so that's been the funniest thing is that it makes me laugh where I'm like, I am the stupidest player in the world. But anyway, that's my experience with Elden Ring so far.
I feel like I believe we talked about this a little bit on a recent episode when we were talking about, game difficulty, that kind of thing. And Elden Ring, it's like the open world allows you to go like grind against, a bunch of lower level stuff in order to be a little bit more powerful. So that when you do take on those big guys, you have a better chance. And I feel like if you want to experience the game in the easiest way possible, I think the best thing to do is find one of those, because there's a million like boomstick gaming YouTube channels out there where they have a guide that's like, do these 10 things and then you'll be powerful enough so that all the bosses are much, much easier. They're not going to be, pushovers or anything. But I know that the first time that I fought that guy on the horse, like he just absolutely destroyed me. But then coming back to him later and being able to take him out after I had like this shield, I can't remember exactly, but I had like a shield that could not heal me. I had a spell that could heal me, and I had a shield that increased something, and I don't remember what my build was like. But when I fought him with all that stuff, I had a much, much easier time. So I feel like, yes, the game is hard. Yes, you are punished for making mistakes in boss fights, but you can kind of game the system, like you were saying, by doing things in a certain order. And even with the DLC, you can go out and you can get all of these different, I don't know what they're called, but we'll just say runes for lack of a better word. You can pick up all these different runes, which increase your stats to make you more powerful, and you don't even have to like fight bosses for them. You just pick them up, put them on you if you know where they are, and then start the game. And I think that that's a really good mechanic. I still would like a pause button, but that's not really what we're talking about here. I also played a little bit of Elden Ring. I don't know if it was this week or if it was last week. I went into a dungeon. Well, I loaded up my old save because, again, people were talking about it and it kind of reignited my interest in it. So I loaded up an old save. I did not start over from scratch. Had some trouble figuring out the controls, kind of like you. And then I went in and I fought a boss and he killed me 5 or 6 times. And then I finally was able to defeat him. And there is a whole lot of that. That it is a very satisfying feeling being able to take out a boss, especially after they've taken you out a couple times.
Right. Yeah, I definitely feel like I need to invest more in the game. And I've been avoiding any of those guides that you just mentioned because I'm like, well, I'm supposed to play this like in a discovery kind of mode. But I think you're right in that I just need to get my feet wet first and then keep going. Like it reminds me of Hades. Like that's a game, I bought it, I just started playing it because people said it was great. And I went through like 20 runs without, this was like really my first time playing like a roguelike and understanding that I'm supposed to die and that's part of the process, you know? And I was just like, this game's no fun. I don't get it. You know what I mean? Why do people love it and stuff? And it took so much longer for it to click with me because I just probably should have watched a 5-minute video first, you know? And so that's probably one of those things where I need to get just a little bit and then I can start jumping into it a little bit better so I can play the game on its terms instead of trying to play it on mine. And so, yeah, I'll probably look up some guides. If anyone has any suggestions, leave them in the comments below. That's usually Bill's thing, but I'm going to say it this time.
I appreciate that. Let me ask you a question before we get into all of the news that we have to talk about today. Which includes things like Nintendo coming after emulators, the new Ambernik, the analog thing, and some a bunch of other stuff. When you're playing games like that, are you good at theory crafting your character, like coming up with builds? Because I'll talk about for me. Whenever I think I'm doing a good thing, but then I look at a guide online and I'm like, oh, okay, so if I equip these 3 things, they kind of synergize together to make me really powerful. And then I play and I'm like, holy cow, that's so much better than the crappy build that I came up with. Are you good at theory crafting?
I hate that stuff. I don't want to do any of that. Like, I don't want to, like, I don't like the idea that if I equip something wrong, I'll be punished because I don't know this arbitrary thing ahead of time. You know what I mean? And so when a game gets to that point, I'm like, no, I would rather, and I've mentioned it like Horizon Zero Dawn and stuff. It's like, I'd rather just do the things that I like to do and then turn the difficulty down so that it still works. You know, like that's kind of where I am with that because it's weird, but I don't like my video games to be video gamey, where it's like I have to do these things that are very video game-esque. I want to play a story. I want to play a movie. You know, like those are the things I want to do. I don't want to be bogged down by menus or like, all that kind of gamey kind of stuff. I don't know. I'm kind of weird like that.
Well, I get what you're saying. The reason I like doing that stuff is because you watch the guide that somebody came up with. A good example would be for like World of Warcraft, you know? Somebody came up with a guide and it's like, by the way, if you have this weapon and these bracers and these legs, it unlocks this. And so I'm like, okay, well, where do I get that weapon? Oh, it's in this dungeon. All right, well, I'm going to go. That's my goal for today. I'm going to go to that dungeon. I'm going to kill the boss and I'm going to hope that that weapon drops. And if it doesn't drop, then I'll do it again and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
That, it almost gives me like a bunch of little mini goals to accomplish. But there's nothing in the game that says these are like little things that you could do. It's always I've gone online and I found a build that somebody else has come up with, And anytime that I try and come up with the builds, they always suck by comparison to the good theory crafters. If you guys, I'm going to do the thing that Russ just did. If you guys, I'm just curious how many of the people who are watching this are good theory crafters or just watch guides. Let us know in the comments down below that like button. Been playing anything else this week, or just been working on your 40XXH review?
Yeah, that was it. Mostly a lot of testing and stuff, but with that theory crafting, something that came into me when you're talking about that is this used to happen a lot in Destiny, because you just get all these random weapon drops, and some people would make these combos and it would be amazing. I would just kind of hope that I got a good one. And sometimes it was amazing. Like, just in general, the developers would make something and it would, it usually would be like one of the like legendary, I forgot what they're called, like the yellow weapons. They had like a yellow kind of background to them. And they were like, if you do this thing, this will happen. And they're just like random perks, but some of those were crazy. The problem was that as soon as you get it, it would be at a certain level. And then as you level up, the weapon doesn't level up. It just kind of holds you back, And so it's this weird kind of thing where you always supposed to be looking for the next weapon. But I like to just stay with the ones I had. And I'm like, this is great. Let me just get stronger with this stuff, And that's not kind of how that game works. But
well, remind me, because I could be wrong, because I haven't played Destiny in a few years. But can't you like take a more powerful weapon and like break it into stuff and then put that stuff into your weapon that you do like, and it raises its item level?
There was like an element of crafting, but again, I never touched that stuff. That's too gamey. You know what I mean? But the thing I figured out was that when you buy DLC or when there's a new update and everybody's levels like go up and stuff, your weapons go up too. And I was like, all right, I'll just wait for the next DLC and this thing will go up to 700 or whatever. And so I would always do that. It's so dumb, but I like to just be I'm like an old man gamer. Like, get off my lawn. I just want to play Destiny my way. I don't even like interacting with the other people, even though it's like an online game. I just want to go and play my strikes, which is like these 10-minute like episode things. That's it.
What's the final shape? Have you picked up the final shape? Have you been playing it?
I think I bought it, but I haven't been playing it. Again, I just leveled up my weapons because of it. Like I'm years behind in the story stuff, because you need like a friends group. You need to go through it and whatnot, to really experience it. And I just don't have any of that stuff. So I will often like kind of start the beginning of it, just get a feel for it. But I'm so far behind in the lore now, and I'm like, none of it matters. I like I mentioned, I just do strikes, and strikes are just these like quick play like kind of things, and they're little episodes, and you get paired up with two different strangers and you just kind of go through it, and they always like Sherpa me, so they're like way ahead of me in terms of like level or whatever, so I just follow them, like, okay, I guess we turn left now, and I just kind of figured out. It's kind of fun. It's
getting really good reviews. The final shape, the last I don't know if it's the last expansion or whatever, but the latest expansion. It's getting really good reviews, like an 89 on Metacritic right now, and it's definitely every time that I play Destiny, I have fun. But it's never that game that I'm like, ooh, I'm itching to play Destiny right now. So anyway, curious. I was just curious about that. All right, let's move on and talk about the thing that we both spent a lot of time on this week, and that is the Ambernik RG40XXH right there. That's this guy right here. You got the blue one, I've got the gray one, and I like the gray one better than the blue one, honestly, but I don't like that color blue. But you and I disagree on this thing, because I don't like this. And you think it's pretty decent.
Yeah, I think it's a good first handheld. Like if somebody's just getting into it and they want to get something and they want something with a larger screen, I think there's a lot to like about it. But I think, it's the same nitpicks I have are the same that you have. But maybe the context is different, because I remember my first handheld back in 2019, which was the Pocket Go. I bought it for watching a Bob Wolf video. And I spent, I don't know, $150 on that thing, because I used his link and like paid for whatever the extra retailer stuff. And that thing sucked. It was so bad, And so nowadays, when I'm thinking, this thing's $70, after ship or plus shipping and whatnot, and it does so many things right. And I'm like, I got no room to complain. And so part of me is always keeping that little magical wonder of like picking up one of these machines and whatnot. So I am a little bit I don't know, a little bit. I'm always tailoring it towards a brand new person and the magic that they're going to have. I try to convey that in my video. So I get it when you're like, I don't like this thing because I like this thing better. Like that's totally true too.
Yeah, I wish it didn't have joysticks. The joysticks are right where my thumb goes, and so whenever my thumb is down, I'm constantly hitting the damn joystick with my thumb when I'm using the D-pad, which is incredibly frustrating, especially because this can't really emulate games too far past like N64, and half the N64 library isn't really going to run very well on this, so why do we need joysticks on it? That's the thing I would have gotten rid of. I love the screen, though. This big 4-inch screen. What do you think is the right size for a screen for a handheld? I'm kind of starting to lean like I want a 5-inch screen on a 5-inch 4x3 or 1x1 screen on a handheld like this with a D-pad and buttons, bumpers, no triggers, and no joysticks. Would you buy that?
I would, specifically for retro gaming, and I have the same issue where like my hands touch the sticks as well, like my thumbs are just kind of resting on it. And I think it's a lot like the Nintendo Switch Lite. It's very much like that too. It's a little bit more separated, but the sticks are they're more prominent. And so because of that was a complaint I had before I ever got a retro handheld. It was like, oh, holding a Nintendo Switch is not fun because these sticks are in the way, So I get all that stuff, not necessarily on the left side, obviously, because the stick's above, but on the right side with the face buttons. I agree. Like, I think that a larger screen with 4x3 is great. I don't mind 4 inches. I think this is great. I think maybe 4.5 would be a little bit better, just easier on the eyes and whatnot. The thing I want is a higher resolution. So I think that 480p is too low, because when it comes to like scaling and getting really crispy pixels for all those retro games that you would want to play on a 4x3 screen, 480p isn't cutting it because it doesn't scale well for Super Nintendo, and also Game Boy Advance. And so I would prefer to have something with at least 720 height pixels, because that's going to give us more room to work with.
So if it were 720 by 720,
which is what the square one is on the RG Cube. Yeah. Right,
but bigger.
Well, I would like to have 720 vertical and then whatever it is, 960 in 4x3 aspect ratio.
So you definitely want 4x3.
Yeah, I would prefer 4x3. I like this. I like the square. I think it's neat and stuff, but I would just rather have 4x3 with a higher resolution, because I think it would just look a little bit more natural,
Fair.
Yeah.
I think that we're in a good place right now with handhelds. There's so many different things that everybody can find one that's really, really good for them. I'm not a fan of the RG40XXH, but that's for my way of looking at it. Yeah. You looked at it in your video as like these 4 different people all come in there, and this person wants this and this person wants this, and you kind of identified who this device is for. And I really liked that way of doing that review, which I watched this morning. So that was really fun to watch.
One thing is that what do you like? Does it get warm to you when you're playing it like in higher end systems, like on the right side?
I would say warm, but not hot. Like I heard other people asking about the thermals, and I did see Carrie like put it under one of it, like that camera thing that he has. I don't have one of those. And it definitely shows like hot spots in the right hand side of the unit back near the trigger, probably a little bit above the middle. And but honestly, for me, I play Super Nintendo, Genesis, arcade. I really don't go. Like, PlayStation is the highest level that I really play on these devices, just because those are the games that I'm nostalgic for, and everything else I would play on a Steam Deck or ROG Ally or something like that, or a Legion Go. Do you feel like the heat is too much? Because I definitely felt warm, but it didn't feel hot to me.
Yeah, I'm super sensitive because of, Hawaii and the humidity and whatnot, and just the overall heat, but I'm same thing as you. I've been forcing myself to play Super Nintendo and below because of the heat issue, and I think it just is a better fit anyway, and I have been playing a little bit of Symphony of the Night, so a little bit of PS1, but yeah, that has changed the way I play it, in that I don't want to play Nintendo 64 and Dreamcast on here, even if they do run, pretty well or whatnot. I just haven't found it to be a good fit, and so I would rather just play just retro games on it, which leads more into the whole thing about the analog sticks getting in the way. But then, okay, one more question.
Yeah.
When you play arcade games, do you use the analog stick or do you use the D-pad?
I suppose it depends on the game. If I'm playing a shmup, then I definitely play with the stick. But I would be perfectly fine using a D-pad on a shmup. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely see that.
I'm fine with it being there for those arcade games, but if it weren't there's no world in which I would miss it on this particular device. You know what I mean?
See, my arcade games, even though I always test with like fighting games in the D-pad, my arcade games are beat 'em ups, like Final Fight and Ninja Turtles and stuff.
Love
and
those.
I always want an analog stick with those. And so that's why I'm always like, oh, I like having an analog stick because that means that I can play my beat 'em up games in the arcade. So.
I suppose that's true, although I gotta say that most of the beat 'em ups that I like, when you talk about Final Fight, I don't have nostalgia for Final Fight in the arcade. I have nostalgia for Final Fight on the Super Nintendo. I have nostalgia for Streets of Rage on the Genesis. The arcade usually was, we would go in, throw quarters in, and play Gauntlet, like those kind of games in the arcade, or shoot 'em ups, or driving games because they had frickin' steering wheels and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or in the 90s, Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter and stuff like that. But even then, that's not really analogous to this layout anyway. So
right.
I would be fine without the sticks still.
Yeah, I think if anything, if they got rid of the sticks and they put in that Sega D-pad that they use like on the Cube and stuff, I think that would be a good compromise for me because it's like stick-like almost, and so I think that would be, it'd be blasphemy for the Nintendo games and whatnot, but I'm a Sega guy. Like I grew up with the Genesis, not the Super Nintendo, so I wouldn't mind that.
I love this D-pad. This D-pad on the Cube is fantastic. So comfortable to use. So I agree with you 1,000%. This D-pad is way better than the D-pad we got over there. The other thing about this that I would... if I could change one thing, it would not be with anything that I've mentioned so far. But if I could change one thing, it would be get rid of this flat back and give me something to hold on to. I've got nothing here.
Yeah.
It's not even textured. It's super smooth, and it's really hard to hold comfortably. I know you said it was comfortable. I do not think this is comfortable to hold.
Yeah, I think of it like I guess like a Super Nintendo controller. That kind of same grip to it. But yeah, I think that if there is going to be stacked triggers here on the back, that they should at least make a grip that is equal to that. Because I also like it when it lays down flat. I don't know why, but I'm very particular about that. I don't like it when it angles back. Part of it's because of the whole YouTube thing. Like, I don't like it reflecting back and like having my forehead in it, It's so, like, that's part of it too. But like, I like it when they lay flat. It just seems like, oh, this is well designed. The Steam Deck lays flat. I like that. And so, I think that they could have probably bumped that out a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, speaking of emulation, Nintendo, their lawyers are at it again. Right, you all thought you were safe. Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, Nintendo sends their lawyers out to target the developers of a bunch of different emulators, including, and these are all, I think that these are all forks of Yuzu. Am I correct in saying that?
Yep.
Yeah, these are all forks of Yuzu. So Suyu, Nuzu, Uzu, I don't know how to say that one.
Yeah, it's like Suyu backwards.
Uzui, Torzu, and Sudachi. And so they're coming after all of those. There's a DMC takedown notice that they sent to GitHub back on July 5th, and basically it says, hey, the reported repositories offer and provide access to the Yuzu emulator or code based on the Yuzu emulator. The Yuzu emulator is designed to play Switch games. Specifically, Yuzu illegally circumvents Nintendo's technological protection measures and runs illegal copies. And so all of those repos are now unavailable. Nintendo, boy, it's like they have this chilling effect. They come in there with the big hammer swinging, and everybody cowers, and then they walk out, and they never have to win a court case, and it just bugs the hell out of me. I'm not saying that I'm all... What's that?
It irks me. Like, they said the word illegally. How many times in there? Like, that has not been proven to be illegal. Like,
right.
they play those illegal games. I'm like, dude, like, you can say that it breaks their terms of services and what, but there has not been a legal case that says that these games are illegal, you know? And so, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I know there's arguments on both sides, but that bothers me that they are making these assumptions from a legal perspective, and it's so intimidating that it makes everyone back off. I've heard that Sudachi, like, they're fighting it, at least with GitHub, and they're basically saying, hey, we forked it, and this is all our own code base now, and it was all, you know, released within, you know, whatever permissions were available within the licenses and whatnot. And then Nintendo, yes, took it down, and now that's their code or whatever, but that doesn't change how open source works. And so I think that they're trying to fight that, but I don't know. Like, I don't know if they have a legit claim to that. I don't know how far that's going to go, you know, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was kind of interesting.
I'm starting to wonder if there will ever, like you mentioned just a second ago, that it's never been proven in court to be illegal, right? It's never gone to court and had the judge say, yep, that's against the rules, don't do that anymore. But I wonder if it ever will. I wonder if it will ever get that far, because Nintendo has so much money that they can just scare everybody away. And that's the kind of thing that drives me up the wall. And I just want to say real quick before we get too far, I am not for piracy. And there's going to be comments in the thing down below the like button where people are like, it's always morally right to pirate Nintendo stuff. Whatever. You can think what you want. You can disagree with me all you want. That's totally fine. I am not for piracy. I am for game preservation. And I'm all for people being able to use ROMs of games that they bought, that they paid for, because we've seen over and over again where these companies pull the rug out from under people who have bought games, and now we can't play those games anymore. They just no longer exist. And Nintendo's pretty bad about it. You look at Super Mario Brothers 35, like, that's a game that by all accounts was really good. I enjoyed the hell out of Super Mario Brothers 35, and then they just shut it down because of artificial scarcity. And they did the same thing with
Tetris 99.
Wait, I think Tetris 99 is still going, isn't it?
Oh, maybe there was another one. There's one of them.
Yeah, there's a new F-Zero one, but there was a collection of Mario games on the Switch, and you cannot buy it anymore. It's no longer available. Yeah, Super Mario All-Stars, thank you, which we'll talk about later on in the game or in the show. Like, that game, you can't buy it anymore unless you can buy like a used copy. So, like, it would be nice to have backups out there so in the future people can still play those games that they paid for at some point. Anyway, it just drives me crazy that Nintendo keeps doing this.
Yeah, it's a shame too, because Sudachi is a great emulator. Like, they took, Yuzu, and then they started building on it. And actually, I haven't really checked out the others. I did a little bit of Suyu, but that looked like it was just kind of a reskin, But Sudachi actually improved emulation with certain games. And so Animal Well for the Switch only would play with the Sudachi emulator on Android. And I thought that was amazing. So I was able to play Animal Well on my Odin 2, which I thought was awesome, So that was really cool. One other note when it comes to Android emulation is that I got my hands on a Nintendo Wii U emulator for Android. It's a total test build, and some idiot just basically shared it on Reddit and was like, hey, the developer put this out for one of his friends, and then we got a hold of it or whatever, and it's not ready yet. It's not going to be ready for a year, but here it is. And then I'm hoping they took it down, but I grabbed it before then. And so I tried it out, and It is not ready. Yeah, like, I tried on my Odin 2, which has got a lot of power, but just GPU driver wise, like, it's got all sorts of artifacts and stuff like that. I only tried a few different games, but yeah, it wasn't working correctly. But Wind Waker HD, that's the one I want to play the most on like a small handheld. And I hope it gets a Nintendo port or something like that. That'll make it a lot, or a Switch port. That'll make it even easier. But either way, so I ended up getting that running. But the problem is in the beginning, it's like, okay, start a new game. All right, what's your name? And it asks you to like type in your name using the Wii U pad. And there's no way in the emulator to get past that screen, to add my name, like Link or Russ or whatever. There's nothing. Like the touchscreen won't work. Plugging in a keyboard won't work. Plugging in a mouse won't work. Using the buttons won't work. Changing different game pads that are being emulated by the emulator doesn't work. And also importing a save from the desktop version of Cemu does not work either. I tried all of those things. I probably wasted a good 2 hours just trying to get past that screen. And so it's honestly, it's just amazing that it even boots up. It makes me so excited that, you know, a year from now when it's ready for release, that we can play Wii U games on an Android device. That's like one of those little missing pieces that I've always had. And so I think it's awesome. And I hope that gets ported over mostly because of Wind Waker HD. And I would probably play Twilight Princess again via that method as well.
Yeah. You brought up something very interesting just now. You were talking about naming your character in Zelda. Do you not always name your character Link?
No, I like to use Russ. It's immersive. So I become Link. I'm Russ. And in that game, they reference in Wind Waker, they reference your name throughout it.
Yeah,
right?
all the time.
So they will call you Russ the whole time. I like it. I did that in Final Fantasy VII. I didn't even know the guy's name was Cloud because his name was Russ. And so it's like, I just play as that. So I'll name it after my friends, you know, like all the other people, all like my pets, you know, they're all in there. We're all going together in that journey.
That's funny. Like there's, when I play Final Fantasy VII, I stick with the default names. When I play Zelda, I always name my character Link every single time. But most games, I name my character Bill. Because I can't be bothered to think of anything. So I was like, Bill's easy enough. I'll just name my character Bill. So like when I'm playing Shining Force, I was playing Shining Force on the Genesis, and you name your character and it doesn't have a name. So I just typed in Bill. Then I don't remember what device I was reviewing. I think I was reviewing the Miyoo Mini Plus. Or no. It was the RG35XX SP, right? Yeah. And because this is a Game Boy, like this is themed after the Game Boy, I definitely went deep into the Game Boy games. And then I found Shining Force for the Game Boy, which, number one, I did not know existed. I only played the Genesis one. I loaded it up. And when I went to name my character, there was already a name there named Max. And I was like, oh, this character had a name, but in the original, he didn't have a name. And so it was always just Bill. So on this, when I'm playing Shining Force on the GBA, my character is named Max because they gave me a character to use. Right. But I'm curious how many people out there always name Link, or how many people always use their own name or some other name.
I had a fond memory so I played Final Fantasy IX on the PS1 back in the day, and that was actually my favorite of the three that released on PS1. And I remember talking to someone about the game years later, and they were talking about Vivi, and they're like, oh yeah, Vivi this, Vivi that. And I'm like, what is a Vivi, you know? And they were talking about the little black mage guy. But I knew him as Paul because he was my roommate at the time. And so I'm like, you mean Paul? You know, I thought it was just so funny that like I for 10 years just considered that guy to be Paul, and he had a name and it was Vivi, and I just didn't remember that. I thought it was funny. It's all very pre-internet.
Yeah. I had a friend who would always name if the game would call you by your name, he would always name his character Fart. And so as he would play, it would always say Fart, blah 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 blah, or thank you, Fart.
Yeah, I think Mass Effect did it the best because you could change the name. You could make yourself Russ, but your last name was Shepard, and they would call you Shepard. And so they're still calling you your name, but you also feel like you're Russ. And so I like that idea too because it just made it feel a little bit more immersive.
Absolutely. Anyway, I don't know how we got onto this topic, but Nintendo, stop it. We've had enough. All right, before we do more emulation news, because there's a lot of emulation news to cover today, I want to talk about this really strange teaser that Nintendo posted on their Twitter, and it is this is the weirdest freaking thing. So there's this guy wearing a trench coat with a bag on his head and a weird smile drawn on it. And the game is called Emio. It's rated MA15 plus in Australia. I don't know what that. I'm thinking is that like T for teen or is that M for mature? I don't know
Somewhere
what the
between,
equivalent would be. Yeah. And it's got strong themes, violence, suicide references, themes, cruelty, and domestic abuse. And all that we've seen is this weird picture of a guy in a trench coat with a bag over his head. And this was tweeted out by Nintendo.
Right.
And that is the weirdest friggin' thing. What do you think? Do you think that Nintendo is getting ready to release a horror game, like a real horror game? Or do you think that that's something else?
Yeah, I don't know. Like my first reaction is just how hilarious it is to see the little Nintendo Switch like red splash screen with little click, it's just so cute and inviting. And then they're like, and here's the worst possible thing to see after that. And they play that. And so the teaser itself is just so funny looking. I mean, it's not scary in any way, obviously. It's just kind of odd looking, but I just found that to be so funny. And it makes me think that, yeah, maybe this is a Nintendo release. I don't know Nintendo well enough and I don't follow it well enough to be like, oh, yeah, they only put this, like I've seen theories where like, oh, they only put the Switch logo when it's one of their games. They don't do that for other people's games, And so I don't know. Like, I don't know the development team or that kind of stuff. It'd be really interesting. I can't figure it must be a new IP. I don't think it's something, obviously, we've seen before, just because I can't place it anywhere. I don't know. I would rather play a Nintendo horror game than like a Resident Evil game because I feel like it would at least give me some breaks, and then it might be a little bit easier. And I don't know.
Man. Yep. Domestic abuse and cruelty and suicide references seems pretty intense.
Yeah. The thing is, like, I feel like many Japanese horror games aren't as scary to me because they're a little bit more atmospheric. Resident Evil obviously is just all that out the window because it's kind of a mix of both, But the atmosphere stuff usually doesn't creep me out that much. It's more about like jump scares and stuff. That stuff I just hate it, And so, I don't know. I'm curious about it, and I think I probably would play it. It's a game I would have to play in a handheld. Like I wouldn't want to play it in a big TV with the lights off, that kind of stuff. Too much, But
so
on a
handheld,
VR
like for Russ.
Yeah, exactly. Like on a handheld, like in bright daylight, yeah, I can probably handle that.
So I went to their YouTube channel where this is hosted, and at the end of the video, it comes up with a red screen that says Nintendo. So it's not just the Switch thing at the beginning. They also have the red screen that says Nintendo at the end. And then I went and I looked at some third-party games that Nintendo had videos of on their YouTube channel. And I didn't check all of them or whatever, but I checked a couple, and they didn't have that red Nintendo logo at the end. They had the Switch thing at the beginning, because they always do that at the beginning. But at the end, they didn't have the red Nintendo logo at the end. So that makes me think that this is actually a first-party game. And
interesting.
Like, you look at when Nintendo always seems to do this where they take a step into a genre that they've not previously taken a step into, and they turn the whole genre on its head. When they made Metroid Prime. Like a first-person shooter. There were other first-person shooters. This was Nintendo's first-person shooter. People are going to tell me I'm wrong, I'm sure. It was their first-person shooter, and it was very different than all of the other first-person shooters. And so I'm very curious. Game. Yeah, how are they going to make a horror game that seems very weird and intense? How are they going to make that different than what we already have? And it's just interesting to me.
Yeah, no, I'm very curious about it. And I just kind of wonder, like, what is the overall theme going to be? How far are they going to push it? It's just a lot. It almost reminds me, the way that they're teasing it, it reminds me of like the Blair Witch Project, which, by the way, like just recently turned like 25 years old. And, the whole like marketing around that one, where like there were people who thought it was real because they even filmed like a fake documentary about the Blair Witch, which was a made up thing. And then they had it posted on Sci-Fi Channel. Like it actually like broadcast. And so then people were going to libraries. Yeah, people are going to libraries and asking about books for Blair Witch, and people are like, there is no book for it, you know? And I think that's just kind of amazing. I was literally this morning reading about it. And if they can do some sort of thing like that, the way they're just kind of teasing it, in today's day and age, everyone's so cynical, everyone picks apart everything. It's very hard to surprise people, but I don't know. Maybe they can do it. Maybe they can come up with something that's really kind of tease us. And I like that. I want to be faked out. You know, I like that idea.
I was certainly surprised by this tweet from Nintendo. Anyway, let's get back to emulation stuff. You wanted to put this story into the show notes, and I was like, absolutely. Well, first off, why don't you set it up for us, and then we'll talk about first the price, and then whether or not you're interested in this. So go ahead.
So Analog, Analog Pocket, so FPGA handheld, they're really great. I have one. It used to be $200. Now they're $220, I think. And then they also do like different colorways, very limited quantities. They have this thing where they say highly limited quantities, and it drums up all this scarcity talk, and then people scalp it and then sell it for more. All this stuff that kind of goes along with it. But those ones, the colored ones, were $250. And so a little bit more of an upmark. And then now they've released, or they've teased, and they're planning on releasing in about 3 days. They're going to have a aluminum version. And so this one is already, they're using the same wording, available in highly limited quantities, entirely CNC'd from aluminum, every single piece. Did you have to see every single piece? Anyway. And so, yeah, there's like things about that just bother me. And then of course the price, which is $280 more than the plastic one, which is crazy.
Yeah. So first off, did you watch Bob's, for people who don't know, Bob Wolf, friend of the show, he's been on the show a couple times. Did you watch Bob's video where he made one of these?
Yeah, so it was from a shop called Retro CN. They make all sorts of like metal shells like this. And yeah, he just put it together himself. And that is not cheap. It's $200 for that one, right? So it's almost at the same price, but there's a bunch of big differences there. Number one is that the Retro CN guys, like they are small batch boutique like releases, which means that when they go to the manufacturer and ask them to make these shells, they are having to get charged an arm and a leg because it's such small batch. Analog doesn't have to worry about that kind of stuff. Even if they order 100, it'll be way cheaper than what this guy's doing with like the 20 shells that he's getting made. And so it's a totally different story there in terms of just order quantity. Like a good example would be, I self-published my own book, years ago, and the minimum order quantity was 800 books. You had to order 800 books. And if you order 800 books, it cost me about $22 a book to get them printed. If I ordered 1,000 books, it was something like $15 a book to get printed. Like everything just kind of scales up so much, like to the point where if you can get 3,000 books made, you're spending $8 a book. Like it gets ridiculous. And so, it's one of those things where Analog has a big discount that they're not talking about. So even though it is $200 for Retro CN, that also includes like import taxes and all these other things that they've included in there. I don't think shipping, but everything else, And you have to remember that Analog's going to charge tax on that. They're also going to charge shipping, which is a minimum of like $60. Like for me to get something sent from Analog, who's I think they ship out of California, but I think they're based out of Oregon, it's $60 to get it sent over here, just across the pond, which I could send something for $4, if I put it media mail or something, And so it's just kind of crazy, the huge upcharge that they're doing right there. And yeah, I'm not a fan of that.
Okay. Do you want one?
No. So that's the other thing. I have used a metal shell. Like I had a device called the Odroid Go Super, and this was like it's about the size of a Nintendo Switch Lite. And somebody made a metal shell for it because the problem was that the buttons on that device were just like really small and mushy. And so they're like, okay, we're going to make a metal shell for it, put in bigger buttons that'll still work with the existing PCB, and you can use the same screen and stuff. So this was a big project of mine. The guy sent it over to me, and they were charging a lot for it too. I think it was around $100-ish for this metal shell, because it was metal buttons, all the same stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And I put it all together. I like took apart my beloved Odroid Go Super, like had to take off the screen and put it back on with new adhesive and all this stuff. And I hated it. It was so heavy and just clacky, and then like everything rattled, you know. And so I don't know, if Analog can pull it off and make it not as clacky and rattly, that might be great, but it's going to be very heavy, and I don't know if people are really actually going to enjoy that.
Well, not just heavy, but like when the Steam Deck first came out, there were a lot of people making like docks and accessories for it, and JSOX is one of those people, and they made a back shell replacement. And the first version of their back shell replacement had a metal part that was supposed to be there so it could pull heat off of the chip, which sounds like a great idea until you touch the friggin' thing, because holy cow, it was so hot. Now, I understand we're talking about a device that plays Elden Ring, for crying out loud. The Analog Pocket is playing like up to what?
So they can play up to like Super Nintendo and some arcade. Like it's not hitting Nintendo 64 or Saturn or anything like that.
So we're not gonna like. Do you think heat would be an issue with a metal shell like this?
It's never even been a thought in my mind with the plastic model. Like there's no ambient heat. The thing is just cool the entire time. So I don't think the heat's going to be an issue. But you're right. Like with metal devices, same thing with that Odroid Go Super. It would get warm. And then Ambernik also has released metal handhelds. I showed one off in my last video about the 405M. It looks like this one. It's metal. That one gets warm. And so yeah, I could see where that could be a concern. But I don't think with Analog it doesn't run hot. I don't think that chip runs very hot at all.
Well, I want one of these because I think it looks really cool, but I don't want it for. No, absolutely not. There is a less than zero chance, because this was sitting on my screen earlier, and my wife walked in and she goes, "What you looking at?" And I was like, "Oh, it's this thing that Russ and I are going to talk about on the show." And she goes, $500 for a Game Boy? And I said, "Yep, that's." She goes, "And you're going to buy that?" And I said, "Can I?" And she said, "No."
Yeah, I mean, it's that is PS5 prices right there, you know, for a device that plays up to Super Nintendo.
That's a really good point. Well, anyway, it looks cool as hell. I like it a lot. I don't like their marketing stuff. They're constantly, like you said, highly limited quantities, trying to bank on that FOMO that people have. And I understand why people think, oh my gosh, this is going to be limited quantities. I'm going to get it, which means it's going to be valuable. It's not going to be valuable in the future. People are not going to be... maybe I'm wrong about this, but I don't think people in 10 years are going to be like, boy, I really would love to get my hands on an Analog Pocket. Like there's...
Right.
Do you feel like people could get nostalgic for these handhelds that we buy? Like we buy them because the games make us feel nostalgic, but in 10 years we're gonna be buying a new one that plays the games that we want to play, that let us feel nostalgic. I don't think people are going to feel nostalgic about this particular hardware. Am I wrong about that? What do you think?
I think that there will be people who either, like, so if we just look at Analog Pocket, or let's look at the Mio Mini, right? So I think people who previously owned the Mio Mini and maybe it broke or whatever, if there was a re-release or there was like a used market, I could see people being like, I want that specific experience again. So I want to buy that one, you know, even if there are better things out there. I could see that, but that is such a small population of people, right? And then also there might be some people who, this is even smaller, but there might be some people like, I always wish I could have gotten a Mio Mini, but I never got one. So maybe I do want to get it. But that's, again, a very small population. So I don't see the same kind of nostalgia there, other than those like two use cases, you know. Yeah, I mean, what happens when there's another Analog Pocket 2 that comes out and it's just like the other one, but is more powerful? Are people going to be like, oh, I want the old one? Like, I want to be able to play less things for the same price, you know?
Right.
Like, I don't see, like, there's a difference there with, like, an electronics product versus like a gaming console. Like there's a kind of a difference there. And so, I don't ever have any sort of nostalgia for an old laptop that I used to have. There are some people who are like, oh yeah, the old iMacs, Yeah, exactly. Like there are people who have that nostalgia for that stuff and the collectors and whatnot. I don't know if that's going to break through with these handhelds, especially the cheap ones. And especially because Ambernik only gives us 2 weeks to enjoy one before they got another one coming out. So,
well, that's absolutely true. All right, moving on. We're going fast today. Let's talk about Gamepass. Gamepass is changing prices. We already knew that they were changing prices, but basically they're also changing like their tier system for like with the different levels, and the most expensive version is now moving from $15 up to $20 a month. First off, do you have Game Pass, Russ?
I do. So I have Game Pass Ultimate, and I got it. So there was a thing where if you had gold, you could convert that to Game Pass Ultimate. There was some sort of promo. This was years ago. And so I did what every, smart person would do, is I bought the full amount of gold that I could get, which I think was 36 months. And I had that all stacked up. And then I converted it all. And so I'm still kind of rolling off of that, as well as like every time I get an ROG Ally, it gives you 3 months. And so I keep pushing it a little bit, So I haven't hit the point. Yeah, so I don't think I've hit the point where I have to buy anything just yet. And so, I do have Game Pass Ultimate, but I am not seeing a $20 a month thing in my checking account. If I saw that, I would be like, what are we doing here?
So it's strange because I subscribe to a lot of shit. I have Amazon Prime. I have HBO, Netflix, Apple TV, blah, 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 all these different subscription services.
Disney, yeah.
And Disney and Microsoft Game Pass. And I had PS Plus, whatever the highest tier was. And I realized when I saw all these stories about the price of this going up, when I saw all those stories, I said to my wife, you know what? I'm going to cancel my PS Plus and my Game Pass, I think. And she says, why? And I said, because I don't play them. The thing is I play the games that I buy.
Right.
Well, okay, let's be honest. I barely play the games that I buy, but the games that I subscribe to, I never touch. I look at I just got a notification that these are the games that are coming to Game Pass, or these are games that are coming to PlayStation or PS Plus. And so I'm like, yeah, add to console, download. But I never load them up. Like they just sit there, and it's not that they're bad games. It's that there's something in my head that says you'll get to it eventually, and then it leaves Game Pass or at least PS Plus, and then I can't play it anymore. And so I end up just infinitely. It's the same thing with like the Epic Games Store. The Epic Games Store would have like free games however often, and I would log into the Epic Games Store, claim the games, download the games, install the games, close the Epic Games Store, and never play the games. So like I only tend to play those games that I've made a decision, well, here's my $20 for this game, or here's my $70 for this game, and then I play that. For the subscriptions, I just don't. Do you feel like you're not getting $20 worth of value out of Game Pass these days for you, even though you're not paying for it yet?
Right. Yeah, it's all free for me because I already paid for it. But yeah, like I don't get that value. I kind of sat down and thought about this, and there's like 3 things that I can think of that have some sort of value with Game Pass Ultimate. Number 1 is it comes with like Xbox Live Gold or whatever. I don't even know what, like Xbox Live or whatever, right?
Yeah, so you can play online.
So I can play Destiny. So okay, I use it for that because I like playing Destiny on the Xbox probably more than anywhere else, just because it works. It's console. I don't have to look at frames per second. I just play it. The second thing is that I do use it for game testing. So often I will I'll use the streaming component in particular. Like I'll be like, okay, let me check streaming on this device, through Android or whatever, and just see how that works. And I love being able to just jump into Forza 5, and it's pretty cool. I never actually play it other than just to kind of run around and see how it works. But I do use it for work, basically. And then the third is that I do like to use it to test games, because I like, so a good example is Requiem. What is that Plague Tale game or whatever that came? Yeah. And so I heard all sorts of great stuff about it. It was getting all these nominations. And I was like, I never even heard of this thing, but it's on, Gamepass. Let me just try it out. And I can just try it right then, just streaming again, because I didn't want to install the big file. And I was 5 minutes and I was like, actually, this is not my game. It's a stealth game. And so, I was able to save myself, $60 or whatever if I was to buy that game. And so that's the other value I see in it sometimes. And I also keep I've got Starfield and Hi-Fi Rush going with cloud saves, through Game Pass. I've never bought those games, but I still like to play them, And so I when we had all this stuff, the price coming up, I was like, man, maybe I should get rid of this. But then I was like, oh, what am I going to do about those save games though? And I was like, maybe I should just buy those games and save myself. You know what I mean? Like it was a Steam sale. Both of them were on sale. You know what I mean? I could have paid whatever it was, $20 or $30 per game or whatever. That's about a month of Game Pass.
But you wouldn't be able to get your save games out of Game Pass into Steam though, right?
Right. But let's be honest, I'm not far in those games. You know what I mean?
That's We're not the next talking question about I was going to ask. How many hours did you spend in Starfield
Gosh, 6 maybe, not a lot. And so I can get back to that. And I think the game's probably better than it was back then anyway, so I'd probably enjoy it more. Yeah. And so, so it is one of those things where my plan now is that I'm going to look at all these new price brackets, because they have not day one versus day one, all that kind of stuff. I haven't really sat down and look at it. And I'm also going to look at what game Xbox Live costs, and then just kind of weigh it from there and kind of get the minimum tier that I can get that gives me live and then also gives me streaming. Those are the two things that I want to be able to have for testing and whatnot. And if that's $20 a month, so be it, because that's probably just going to be what I have to pay.
On one hand, when I look at this, I'm like, all right, so you guys can see behind me, I'm running Forza Horizon 5 on my ROG Ally X. It's hooked up to that little screen back there. So when I am testing a new device and I want to do a benchmark, Forza Horizon 5 is a good one to do a benchmark of for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's a pretty beefy game. It doesn't run amazingly well, so you can get some pretty decent stuff out of it. You can get some good results out of it. Secondly, it has a built-in benchmark utility, which for somebody like me who doesn't know much about benchmarking, I'm not Carrie, who's got this whole scripts running and crazy things happening. That makes it easy for me to do a benchmark. So on one hand, I like it for that. I also like it for whenever I want to put on camera, have two devices playing games at the same time. Yeah. Because I don't want to have to deal with trying to figure out how to put something in offline mode, and I could just say, oh, I'll launch a Game Pass game on this, I'll launch a Steam game on this one, and then I'm all set. But also, $20 a month, that's really not that bad. You could easily, if I went to Dunkin' Donuts right now and bought myself a coffee and a coffee for my wife and a coffee for my son, that's $16 or something like that already. And $20 a month. That's really not bad. And yes, I don't really take advantage of it very often, but if I do decide to, it's there. Yeah. So I'm totally, I don't know what to do. I don't know if I'm going to get rid of it or if I'm not going to get rid of it. I'm definitely going to, the day one thing pisses me off, because that's the thing that they've been saying all along. Day one with Game Pass. Yes, right. But now, well, first off, it was never day one with Game Pass, because it was day 3 with Game Pass, because it was only day one if you also bought the game. Right. But that's beside the point. But now it's only day one with Game Pass if you pay for the most expensive tier. And will it really be day one with Game Pass, or will it be day 3 with Game Pass? That's the thing. I don't trust them. They're liars.
Yeah. So I've looked up the tiers while you were talking to kind of figure out. So there is, there's still Xbox Live Gold, and that's also $10 a month. That's the lowest tier. That gives you, the ability to play online, and it gives you the 2 games a month that they always do, and then you get some discounts and things like that. So that's $10 a month. For also $10 a month, you can just get Game Pass, what they're calling Core now. That's the one that gives you also Live Gold, so you can play it online. You don't get those 2 games a month, but you get, access to, it says over 25 high quality games. And then you get those same discounts and stuff. So you kind of have to choose between those two. But then you're right. Like from there, it's $12 for PC Game Pass, which says it has day one releases. But again, that's PC games. And then the cloud gaming, it says yes, but only select games via GeForce Now Ultimate. And that's it. So really, if I want the tier that I want, the one that gives me the live and gives me the cloud gaming so that I can use that just on the fly with my save games and all that, it's still the $20 a month. And so all I'm seeing then is I'm just seeing a price increase from $5. And I think that's just something I'll just have to live with, When PlayStation made their most recent price increase, I did decide to cancel because I don't use live play with that at all. And then also like the, whatever free games you get or whatever, they were never holding the value for me. And so I ended up just canceling outright. So I just play my PS5 offline. And that makes sense for me. I don't get those discounts, but when there's a good enough sale, I'll buy a game and then I'll just play it offline because those are the type of games I play on PS5 anyway. So that one I full on canceled. But Xbox, I think they're going to get that $20 a month out of me.
Okay, how far can they push it then, Russ? How far can they push that number before Russ is like, I'm out?
Well, considering that I'm already contemplating it at $20 a month, I would say that this is about my limit right now. Unless there's some sort of perk added to it. I don't know. $25 a month is egregious to me. Like that is a lot for a service that, and it's a lot of value if they were just using that, right? I don't want to discount like how much gaming you can get out of that, but there's not a lot of gaming that I get out of that. And so for me, it's $20 a month is kind of pushing it. If I didn't have a channel where I wanted to test these things, I probably wouldn't get it at all. I would probably get just the Xbox Live Gold and get my 2 free games a month, and just like I always did, years back.
How do you feel about? Do you subscribe to Humble Choice?
No, I don't.
No,
because of the same reason. Like, there's just not enough value for me for that.
Oh, I think right now, like it's $12 a month, and they show you the games that they're going to have, and then you can say, I'm going to skip this month, and you don't get charged.
Oh, and
when you get the games, they are added to your Steam library. They belong to you. It's not a rotating list that comes in and out.
When you cancel, you still have it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, Humble Choice is really, really good. There's a lot of games in my gaming library that are games that I would never have bought. But I'm a big fan of Humble Choice, and for a long time I always said that Game Pass was the best value. I think that at this point Humble Choice is probably the better value, especially because they give you the option to say no thank you, and they also give you, like, you get to keep the game. It just gets added to your library like any other game that you've bought. They had this other like Humble launcher for a while.
Yeah.
And the games that were in that would rotate out of your ability to play, but I don't think that they do that anymore. At least they never did that while I subscribed to it. So I subscribed to Humble Choice, and I like them a lot. But
I think it's funny that this month's games are Requiem, like a Plague Tale, the game that we were just talking about. Like, that's the game. And so because I went to the site and I'm like, all right, what can I see this month? They have that, and then Ghost Runner 2, and then like Starship Troopers and a couple others I've never heard of. Yeah, that's funny. So this is not my month, but maybe next month I'll check it out.
Yeah,
that is a good value. $12 for all those games is not bad.
It is a really good deal. Although I'm looking at the games that are coming out this month, and I think I will skip this month. And because I could just click a button and say, no, thank you, I don't want those games, and they won't get added to my library, and I won't get charged my $12.
That's pretty cool. Did they give you like a reminder to say, hey, make sure you cancel, or make sure you
pick these up? They do not.
Okay, so you got to like schedule.
They don't give you a reminder. You will get charged, and you'll be like, oh shoot, I meant to cancel that this month, and I didn't. Well, I guess I've got some games. because I have a ton of games on Steam that I would never have bought, but that month there was like one or two that I was like, oh man, that's worth the $12, and then these other 4, who cares? Which I think the Requiem Plague Tale that you were talking about, that's like usually there's like one every month that people are like, we're eating good, and then the rest are like kind of, I don't want to say bad games because I'd never played them, but games that most people have never even heard of.
Sure. I think that game is worth $12. It just is not for me. You know what I mean? But the value and the production and, you know, the quality of that game, $12 easy. And that's...
Is that the game with the rats?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. That's all I know about is the game with the rats where like there were rats everywhere and you had light and you had to move the rats by putting torches down or whatever. And I was like, I don't like rats very much, so I think I'm going to pass on that. All right. This is a new segment. I don't know if we're going to do this every time, but it's called This Week in Gaming History. And I've got a link here. We click on the link and we try and find a game to talk about that came out either today or on, you know, different, like somewhere near today. And I was telling Russ about this at the beginning of the show, and he said he clicked on it and said, oh, look at that. Super Mario, what is it again?
All-Stars.
Oh, All-Stars. Yeah, thank you. Super Mario All-Stars back in 1993 was released for the Super Nintendo. I had this game on my Super Nintendo, and I loved Super Mario All-Stars because it had Super Mario 1, 2, and 3, and Super Mario. Well, the one that I had also had Super Mario World.
Oh, yeah.
Like, but they don't all have that, right?
That's rare. Yeah. Not a lot of them have that, but some do.
Yeah. So it had the first 3 games and Super Mario World, and that was the one that the one that I had with my Super Nintendo when I was a kid. But the thing about these is that all 3 of them they had full graphic overhauls. And they looked really good, and they played fantastic. Did you actually have this when you were younger, Russ?
No, I didn't have a Super Nintendo. I had a Sega, but I, you know, friends and stuff. So I definitely played it. It also came with Lost Levels, which was like Japan Super Mario 2. You know, the whole story, and I know everyone knows it, but like, you know, they thought that it was going to be too hard for Americans, and so they made our Mario 2, which is based on like, you know, Doki Doki Panic, which was a game that they made for a specific festival, but it was made by Nintendo and whatnot. So they reskinned that with Mario people and sent that over to us. It was a huge hit, and then they released it over in Japan, calling it Super Mario USA. And so, yeah, Lost Levels was a game that was not playable for general American audiences until the Super Mario All-Stars came out in 1993. So that was like the big thing. And I got to be honest, I never played it because I was like, you mean it's Mario 1 but harder? No way. I'm not going to play that game. And so I never played it. You know, it had the blue mushroom that would kill you if you touched it, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'm weird in that growing up, when we had the Nintendo, we got the NES pretty early in this life cycle. We got like the Power Pack or something like that. And it came with Rob the Robot and a Zapper. And so we got Gyromite the game, which is Rob the Robot would move these discs, and it was like a puzzle game, and you had to like use this guy or you had to use a second player. So we had that, and then we had the Zapper for Duck Hunt, and no Mario Brothers. And so we did not have Mario Brothers in my house at all. Like our first Mario game was Mario 2. And so I'm not good at Mario 1. I still to this day am terrible at it. So the idea of Lost Levels making it harder is like, that's too much for me. And so one thing I do love about this, though, is that it had the Super Mario World controls, where X or Y is the run button, B is the jump button. So you have it in a more natural position because of the Super Nintendo controller with the 4 buttons. Instead of the NES where you're like holding it and kind of wiggling your elbow to kind of both run and jump at the same time.
Yeah.
And so I'm still to this day like programmed to prefer that with a 4-button D-pad. And so by default, all these emulators have it the other way, where you're supposed to press B, which is the south button, and then press A, which is the right button to jump. No, every time I go into emulators and I remap that for NES games even to make it so that the run game or the B button is Y and then the A button is B for Mario games in particular, and like Donkey Kong Country, you know, stuff like that. Well, I guess that's a Super Nintendo game, but it's the same style. You know, I like to have that kind of run mechanic. And so that was one of the things I really appreciate about those updated games, even though I like the older graphics better just because it's more nostalgic for me.
I like the newer graphics better personally, mostly because like I can yes, I had the original Nintendo Entertainment System, and I had Mario games for it. I had Super Mario 1 and 2 and 3 on that. Well, I think I borrowed 3 from a friend because I didn't have the money to buy it. But I had played all of those. And then when the Super Nintendo came out and I was able to pick it up, I think, if I remember correctly, mine came with Super Mario All-Stars and World. And so, like, I bought that, and I hooked it up, and I loaded it in, and I was like, oh my God, these graphics are unbelievable. Yeah. They look so good. They've made these games so much better. And, like, I was still young when I played that, and so I was like, okay, I have nostalgia for that now. And I like the old ones as well, but I like the newer ones from the Super Nintendo better.
Yeah.
And the thing that I never think to load that up to play Mario 2 or Mario 3. I really don't play Mario 1 all that much, but I never think to load All-Stars up for that. And like just having this conversation where you picked that game out of the games that came out on this date makes me want to load that up and play it. I think that that's going to be something I'm going to do after the show, probably on the 35XX, because that game is just so friggin' good. And it's 4. Well, the one that I had was 5 games because it had all 4 of the Nintendo ones and then Super Mario World.
It's back in those days, we didn't have a lot of like games like this that had a ton of value to them. There was a 6-in-1 pack for the Genesis that came with like older Genesis systems, and that had like, I can't even remember because I never had it, but it had like Golden Axe and Columns and a bunch of others, like games that everyone else paid $60 retail for when they first released. You could now get them all as a pack-in with the Genesis itself in the late stages. So that was amazing. But yeah, you rarely would see a collection like this on one cartridge. And so I remember Mario All-Stars being like, this is like the best value ever. It's like a lifetime worth of Mario games right then and there. The other thing I really loved about it was the audio, like the sound was, like the music was so good. I remember hearing, Mario 2 has always been my favorite. I remember hearing Mario 2 on the Super Nintendo version. I was like, whoa, it's like seeing HD or 4K for the first time, it just kind of blew my mind. And so I really enjoyed the music and the audio in Mario All-Stars as well. I thought it was amazing.
Very cool. Well, anyway, that's this week in gaming history. Moving on to Q&A, we've got a email that was sent in from Gabriel. They sent an email to nerdnestpod@gmail.com. If you want to give us topics to talk about or have questions for the show, nerdnestpod@gmail.com. And Gabriel said, what do you think of the OG Steam controller since the new one is coming out? And he says, and it has the touchpads. I think he meant to say, and it doesn't have the touchpads, because the HoriPad Steam controller does not have touchpads. Did you ever have a Steam controller, Russ?
Never even touched one. So yeah, unfortunately, like that's kind of like a blank spot in my PC gaming life, and that I just wasn't around during that time playing PC games and whatnot. So yeah, never touched it. I know you love it. I don't remember. Right?
I adore this controller. This is one of the best controllers ever made. It's not perfect. It's the bumpers. Listen to the bumpers on this thing.
Oh gosh.
Feel very hollow and loud, and this is definitely cheap feeling, in my opinion. Very, very cheap feeling. The face buttons on this are very small. Like I don't like the size of them. They're also very curved on top. I prefer flatter face buttons. All those things aside, this thing is still one of my favorite controllers of all time because of the trackpads and the crazy shit that you can do with the trackpads. So like when Doom 2016 came out, I played all the way through Doom 2016 just on this controller. And like I had it set up to emulate mouse and keyboard. And so what I would do is I would do big movements with the right trackpad, and then I would do small adjustments with gyro. And like I went through that. That's a very, very fast-paced game. And I would say that I'm not going to say that I could be competitive. I'm not saying I could be competitive, but you could definitely have people who play games on the Steam controller be competitive with people who are playing on mouse and keyboard. because the trackpads are just so amazing. And it makes every single time I pick this up, and I picked it up specifically because he had sent in this email, although I recently cannibalized the batteries out of it for something. I don't remember what. We needed batteries, so I grabbed the batteries out of this for something. So I don't really use it much these days, but this is one of the best controllers ever made. And every single time that I think about it, and Steam or Valve hasn't put out a new one yet, it makes me really sad. It also makes me sad that nobody tried putting I don't need the trackpad on the left, but the trackpad on the right is freaking amazing. And I really wish that somebody else had done something like this. If you could get your hands on one for a reasonable price, would you buy it, or do you feel like, I don't really need that?
I'm curious about it because those ergonomics look so weird to me. And then also, like, I don't know what the texture of the trackpads are. Like, how does it feel? You know, like, is it smooth?
It feels very similar to the one. It's similar to the ones on the Steam Deck. Yeah, they feel the same.
And they're just haptic feedback, or?
Yeah, so they have haptic feedback, and so as you skate your thumb around on it, it kind of vibrates almost. It feels, it tricks you. It tricks me anyway. It feels like it's vibrating under where your thumb is as you're moving it. So it feels like there's this extra level of texture when you're playing on the Steam controller that's not really there. It's a really strange feeling when you do it. And it's bad. Like the haptics in this are better than the haptics on the Steam Deck touchpads. Okay.
Yeah, I am curious about it. It's one of those where I've slowly been buying up random things over the years. Like I got like a Neo Geo controller and a Sega Saturn controller because I want to be able to describe them, to be able to say, this is like this device is like this controller, you know. And this is one of those gaps that I have that I wouldn't mind filling. I do the same thing with handhelds. I've bought a bunch of handhelds, like old ones, Neo Geo Pocket Color and stuff. And I meant to make videos on them, and I just haven't yet. And so I worry that if I did buy this, I wouldn't make a video on it. So I need to get through some others, you know, put the proof where the pudding is, and then, maybe get through it.
Yeah. You know what? I think I might revisit this, and maybe I'll make a video about this sometime in the near future. That's evergreen content because this is old. So maybe I will make a video about this. By the way, most of them don't have the sticker on it. I think I bought this sticker from D-Brand or somebody, maybe like, it's not actually like this. They're all black. So I don't even know where I got that sticker from because it was so long ago. But I love the Steam controller. If I could change anything about it, I already said the things that I would change. Needs better build quality. You said the ergonomics looked weird to you. Like most people, when they hold it like this, and I think it's better to hold it kind of where it's sitting in your fingertips, and then and it's just that you hold it a different way, and then it feels really good, but it's not readily apparent the first time. It's kind of like when Apple said you're holding it wrong to the people who are having attenuation on their phones. Right.
Yeah, no, I am definitely curious about it. What do they go for nowadays? Like, how much was it retail? Like $50?
It was $50. It might have been $40 retail. This one, well, one of the ones that I have, because I have two of them. One of them was full price. I can't remember what it was. I think $50. And then the other one was $5 because they had a fire sale after they lost the lawsuit.
So now, but if you look on eBay now.
Oh yeah, I'm curious what he's going to be very unhappy with the results he finds because they're very expensive, I think.
Okay, Steam controller, and then I'm going to go down to. There's a way you can see things that have been sold already, so you can just like see what they're going for as opposed to like, there we go, sold items. Not too bad. 40-ish. I mean, they're kind of rare. Oh, they're really? 70. 40-ish again. Well, the carrying case goes for $35. That's crazy. 90. So yeah, somewhere between there's 120. Well, that's with a Steam Link. Yeah, so I'm seeing somewhere between 50 and 100 in general. That's not too bad. I was worried.
That's not too bad. I thought it was going to be way more.
That's not too bad.
Yeah.
A lot of these are auctions, though. Like the people are auctioning and they're getting a good deal because no one else is interested. So, it's hit or miss.
Yeah, I'm always worried about buying things from eBay and Facebook Marketplace and stuff like that. I worry that I'm going to get ripped off or whatever. But if I'm curious, how many of you out there actually have hands-on with a Steam controller, and what do you guys think of it? I think a lot of people never gave it a chance. But thank you, Gabriel, for the email. Again, if you want to send in an email to the show, nerdnestpod@gmail.com. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Nerd Nest. Russ, I know that you just put out your full review of the Ambernik RG40XXH. What's your next video that's coming?
I'm going to do a video on the Beelink SCR8, which is their most recent flagship or high-end mini PC. And Carrie just did a video on it last week talking about overclocking on it. Really interesting stuff, and mostly talking about how he can underclock it, or at least pull some of the wattage down, and it doesn't affect performance. And so I thought that was pretty interesting, especially for a lot of people who buy these mini PCs, especially in Europe because of the energy crisis and whatnot. They're just trying not to pull so much power when they're using their computers. And so this seems to be a pretty good idea. I'm just going to leave everything in default settings and then reference his video. But yeah, I'm really liking it. It's got a full aluminum case to it. Just really good. It's almost like peak Beelink. And I might actually use that in my subtitle and be peak Beelink because it is really good. And so that's my next video, is a mini PC. And I'm not sure after that. I got to start working on the ROG Ally X review. So I'll probably hunker down and start working on that.
Yeah, next week when we do the episode of the podcast, it's going to be very heavily focused on the ROG Ally X because by the time the show comes out, all of the embargoes will have been lifted. I will have a video out about the ROG Ally X at that point. I'm sure that, Russ and Carrie and Rich, we all will. I also have a video coming out. Well, we're recording this on Sunday. This episode, you guys will see it on Monday. The video that I have coming out the day after that is all about whether or not Valve is a monopoly. And that one's already done, and it's coming out on Tuesday, so look forward to that. And you guys just spent an hour and a half with me and Russ, and I don't know about you, Russ, but I enjoyed hanging out with these folks. Awesome. So thank you guys for watching the show, and we will see you next time. Stay rad, everybody.